Good morning. I'm Robin Mitchell, a romance novel fan and a staff writer on the features team of the Tampa Bay Times. I'm honored to be here to introduce two women, fellow journalists, who have turned their expertise in our craft into two books so steamy, I blushed while reading them in public. Seriously, I had a church friend ask me if I was all right. Linda Bond, author of Cuba Undercover, may be more familiar to the audience as veteran newscaster Linda Hurtado, who has worked in Tampa for 20 years. Cuba Undercover is her second romantic thriller, and it's inspired by her real-life love story where she met her husband as a reporter on assignment in Cuba. Hopefully, she wasn't also kidnapped there. She's got 12 Emmys, a Florida Bar Award, and an Edward R. Murrow Award. On top of being extremely accomplished, a breast cancer survivor, and a literature enthusiast, Bond is also a wife, mother, pet owner, and Tampa resident. Please help me in welcoming Linda Bond. Tamara Lush is married to an Italian, and her debut book, Hot Shade, just happens to be about the relationship of a hot Italian reporter and a young Florida journalist. I think I'm sensing a theme here. She's worked as a print and digital reporter for the Associated Press and has had her stories reprinted everywhere, from USA Today to People magazine to a little newspaper called the Tampa Bay Times. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's pretty good. Lush started her writing career with Indiana Jones fan fiction, proving age-old wisdom that hot men have been a great motivators throughout history. As a St. Petersburg resident, you can probably find her on social media doing yoga, chasing her pups, or snapping pictures of food she's prepared. Please help me welcome Tamara Lush.
Thank you so much. Can all of you guys hear me? Yeah. I'm going to stand up, and hopefully this isn't going to cause a problem because I need to be somewhat close to the PowerPoint. First of all, raise your hand if you read romance. Oh my gosh, not everybody in this room. Hopefully we're going to change your minds before you leave today. But thank you all very much for coming. As she mentioned, my name is Linda Hurtado, and many of you in this room may recognize me as the 5 o'clock anchor and the health reporter for ABC Action News. I've been anchoring the news for about 20 years. What you may not have known is that I also write fiction under the pen name Linda Bond. I write romantic thrillers, and I'll explain why I chose Linda Bond in just a minute. My first book was published by Entangled Publishing in July of 2014, and it was called Alive at 5. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about how I came up with the idea for this book. I was sitting on the anchor desk with my co-anchor, who at the time was named Walt Macaborski, and I was reading a story, it was one of those 20-second readers, about an adventure vacation in Florida. And I turned to him and I said, that would be the coolest background for a murder mystery, right? Because people are doing dangerous things anyway. They're jumping out of planes, they're swimming with the sharks, they're underground cave diving. So you could make murder look like an accident, and they've signed a waiver. No one's even going to investigate. And Walt turned to me and he said, wow, that sounds like a really cool book. I would buy that. I said, well, there you go. I'm going to write a romance novel with testosterone in it about an adventure vacation, and maybe men will read it. And if you go to Amazon and you read the reviews of Alive at 5, you will see that there are a number of men who read it, and they really do like it. The second book I published is called Cuba Undercover. There's a couple of interesting things about this book. It was published in July of this year, and first of all, I'm going to just let you read a little bit of the back cover blurb to kind of tell you what it's about. 2 countries, 90 miles apart, 2 Cuban Americans undercover and at odds. 1 love destined to bring enemies together. I've always been fascinated with Cuba. But in 1998, I went to Cuba to report on the visit of Pope John Paul II with Fidel Castro. And while I was there, I met this handsome man. He now is my husband. I did a story on his family, and the reason that I chose to do a story on his family is because there are 4 brothers in this family. And only 2 decided to go back in 1998 to Cuba with their parents. The 2 others decided they would not go back because they weren't going to step foot in Cuba again until Fidel Castro was gone. I'm sure you've heard, right? The other 2, including my husband, wanted to go back because they wanted to see Cuba through the eyes of their parents. And they feared if they didn't go now, or back in 1998, They never would get to see it the way their parents saw it. And I was so fascinated with this conflict that decades after a revolution ended, this dictator was still able to divide families. Every good book needs a good conflict, right? So that was the very foundation of Cuba Undercover. Another interesting thing happened as I was editing this book. I sold it to Entangled Publishing, and we went through the process of editing it. Sometimes you can edit a book 3 or 4 times. I had to edit it even more than that because President Obama started having press conferences almost every month about the changing relationship between the United States and Cuba, which I think is a very good thing. However, when you have a book that is based on the conflict between the two countries about to come out, it's stressful. Every time that he would announce an embassy was opening or the travel restrictions were going to be lessened, I'd get an email from my editor and going, well, this part of the book doesn't work anymore. How are you going to change it? So this was really fun. I think I edited the book 4 or 5 times before it finally came out in July. So we'll talk a little bit more about our books, but before I'd like to let Tamara take over and tell you a little bit about what she writes.
Hi, I'm Tamara Lush, and I'm a reporter with the Associated Press. I am not used to speaking in front of people, and I'm not used to all of this attention for anything I write. Usually I toil away at my computer, alone in my office, or at my house, or in a Starbucks, or in my car, and write the news that you probably read in your local newspaper, or in newspapers around the globe. I cover a variety of things for the AP. I'm the Gulf Coast correspondent. I'm based here. Actually, I'm based in the Times building in downtown St. Pete, and I cover pretty much from Naples to Citrus County, but I also go all over the southern United States and sometimes even to Haiti. As you can see, there's a photo of me about 3 days after the Haiti earthquake. I was at the Port-au-Prince morgue there. As you can see from the look on my face, it was not good. And that's me at the Romance Writers of America conference, and a much happier time. I'll talk a little bit about why I am writing romance now, but I've always been a fan of the genre. I've always liked really sexy romantic stories, and so I decided to write my own story. And so in September of this year, I published my first novel, Hot Shade, with Burroughs Publishing Group, and it's a story, it's a coming-of-age story about a young reporter who gets a job at a small Florida newspaper on an island, and she meets a sexy and mysterious Italian man while covering a plane crash. And she enjoys sort of an awakening, a sexual awakening, and an awakening about the truths of her life. And so it's in what we call the new adult genre, and it's really a coming-of-age story about a young woman. So,
before we talk more about our books or why we write romance, we want to talk to you a little bit about who reads it, and it's not just who you think. We touched on this a little bit. Women make up approximately 82% of romance book buyers, but men make up 18%. I see you men in the front row, right? We're going to try to win you over. The average age, although I think this is changing. They said, I think this came from the Romance Writers of America, 30 to 50 years old. But Tamara talked about that there's this whole new group of readers that are finding romance, and they're young adult and new adults, so they're much younger. It's a very big business. 1.1 billion in sales back in 2013, and the publisher of Burroughs is here. I think you said it's even more now, right? 1.4 billion. It's a big business, so that tells you something. That's in 2013, it was roughly 1/5 of all adult fiction sales.
And romance book buyers, they're not the people who you might think who are romance book buyers. They have an average income of $55,000. And while it's true that some of the biggest readers of romance are in the southern US, romances are huge across the globe. For instance, last year Harlequin, who you're probably most familiar with, sold more than 3 books per second worldwide, according to the RWA, Romance Writers of America. And approximately half of Harlequin's books are sold outside North America. Over 800 titles hit the stands each month around the world with just this one publisher. And there's many, many publishers. And in total, Harlequin has shipped more than 6.38 billion books around the world. And consider this, and this shows the scope and how big romance is across the globe. This is a photo that was in the New York Times this week, and a photographer did a photo essay about a subculture of romance novelists in Nigeria. And these romance novelists, the readers and writers in that country, they write and read romance so to speak out on sensitive topics in their country. They speak out against such things as child marriage and human trafficking. So to people who say that romance novels are inconsequential, we just need to look at something like this to know that they're not. They're bringing important topics about women to women across the globe.
Which leads right into, why do women read romance? Women of all different cultures, all different races, all different countries. Well, I found this online at Psychology Today by Dr. Marianne Fisher, and I really liked it because as a TV reporter, I like to sum things up, like in 20 seconds or less. So this is just a paragraph. These books are candy for women's brains. The reader can live vicariously through the heroine and fall in love with the hero, but without any of the consequences. She's not really cheating on her husband, right? Most of our readers are married. It's just a novel. She isn't at risk of becoming pregnant, but she can imagine the seduction by the hero. She gets the thrill, the rush of falling in love, and it's all for a few dollars. So here's my take on why women read romance novels. It's an escape. It's to unwind. I know my audience, and I know them really well because they're just like me. Whether you're working a professional job, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're married or not, women take on so many responsibilities, do we not? So at the end of the day, we're exhausted. And this is what I like to do. I like to go into the bathroom and shut the door and pour a bath and tell my kids, do not come get me unless the house is on fire, and then call 911 first. I pour a glass of wine, maybe light a few candles, pick up a book, and here's the key to me. I don't want to work at this point. I don't want to read anything that's work. I want to read something that's fun and easy to read. But what I want to tell you all is if the book is easy to read, it was hard to write. Because a book that is easy to read is well written, don't you think?
I'd also like to say that it's not just photos of shirtless guys, and it's not just men and women lusting after these handsome guys. I mean, that's a lot of romance, but there's something for everyone in romance. I like to say, whatever your catnip is, it's out there for you. And for instance, romance, there's also a lot of diversity in romance in many, many ways. If you're interested in male-male romance, it's out there, very popular with women and men. Lesbian romance, available. Menage, yes. And menage with a man, woman, and a dragon, it's out there. Men who turn into bears, wolves, and panthers, it's out there. And in romance, whatever your fantasy is, even if it's an Amish romance with no kissing, it's available to you. Whatever your preference is, it's there.
The front row is laughing. So, do you think that women are fantasizing about this gentleman, this Cupid? Probably not. What about this gentleman? Yeah, I got a reaction out of the front row. This gentleman actually ended up on the cover of Cube Undercover, my book. That was not my decision, though I think it was a good one. Why? Because it's a fantasy, folks. You've seen all the romance covers. These are some of them through the times. It is a fantasy, but I personally think that it's actually a healthy fantasy, and here's why. Authors use sex scenes to present a healthy activity shared by two consenting adults who, in the end, if not at that very moment, fall in love with each other. Heroines are sexually satisfied during each encounter. It's a safe place to explore your fantasies and figure out what turns you on. And there's really nothing dumb about that. I also think that this paragraph by Anne Browning Walker in the Huffington Post online talks a little bit about why 50 Shades of Grey was so popular. How many of you know and have heard about 50 Shades of Grey, right? How many of you have actually read it? Some of you? Well, I think the reason that it was so popular was because it explored a sexual fantasy that not many people talked about at the time or were aware of. I also think if more men understood the power of the romance novel, they'd buy some more, if not to read them themselves, perhaps for their wives, right? Men are very visual. For women, everything starts right up here. They like to read their romance novels, and if you bought her one and maybe even read it with her, you might look more like that.
Romance readers are voracious. 46% of romance readers read more than one book a week, and in comparison, the average American reads 5 books a year. So before you dismiss romance as being stupid, think about what women are reading and why they're reading it. And sometimes, although women do just want to escape, they do get other things from romance novels. Like Linda just talked about, 50 Shades of Grey, and everybody talks about that and how, and a lot of people are very derisive of that book because of the way it was written. I think that there's other reasons why people wrote that book. I feel like I need to interject here. I think also people read that book because it was at the rise of ebook publishing, and it came out during the recession. And I think in some ways that book was a bit, the real aphrodisiac of that book was wealth and consumption. And I think that those sorts of themes are very prevalent in romance novels, and why women read them also. It's not just this mindless thing sometimes. Romance novels can go deeper. And also, I want to talk a little bit about, well, smart women read romance. I think we all know that. But it's also a way, and like Linda said, to escape. A reader colleague wrote to me recently. She is a photojournalist, actually. Hi. Just to let you know, I'm loving your book, The Perfect Distraction, while sitting in ICU with my husband as he recovers from surgery. Between your book and Orange is the New Black, the days are a bit easier. And I'm not going to give this woman's identity, but she's as hard-bitten of a journalist as any I've known, and she's covered coups and wars and seen some serious things, and she's willingly allowing herself to be swept away for a few hours while dealing with a difficult time in her life. So who reads romance? These are the people who have read my book recently. Lawyers, doctors, wives of Pulitzer Prize winners, photographers, media executives, lots of people, lots of very, very smart women. And
the Pulitzer Prize winner might have
that.
read it too. You never know. It may just not have said anything.
Not yet, anyway. And 42% of romance readers hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and only 11% have some high school or less. So blow the stereotypes wide open. They're probably not true.
Here's another reason why smart women read romance novels. This was an essay by journalist Maria Bastillos. Romance novels are actually feminist documents. They're written almost exclusively by women, for women, and are concerned with women, their relationships in the family, love and marriage, their place in society, the world, the dreams of the future, which you touched on before. So it's not all about the sex.
It's not. And it is really easy to make fun of romance. They're porn for women, people say, books for stupid women who like Fabio, and romance readers can't distinguish fact from fiction. So does that mean thrillers want to make people kill other people? I'm not sure. And if women do get the idea that their pleasure and their desires are things that are to be taken seriously because they were inspired by a romance novel, is that really a bad thing? I don't think it is.
So who writes romance? Smart women write romance. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the women locally here in the Tampa area romance authors group. This is Karen Rose. She used to be an engineer. She's now a New York Times best-selling author. It's hard for me to get a hold of her because she's either in Alaska or Australia or Germany. She's traveling the world telling people about her books. This is Jane Penning. She is an attorney here in town. She does write under a pen name, so that's not her real name. She just had a book come out from Entangled. Tamara and I, of course, two working journalists. These are a couple of authors from Entangled Publishing. Laura Kay taught at the U.S. Naval Academy. Pin-Tip Dunn, I have to come over here and read what all she's done. It's crazy. Graduated from Harvard University, magna cum laude, with an A.B. in English, Literature, and Language. She received her J.D. at Yale Law School, where she was the editor of the Yale Law Journal. Wow. You have a few, too, from Burroughs you want to tell about.
I do, yes. Paula Milhouse with Burroughs Publishing is a nurse by day and a fantasy romantic suspense author by night. That's a great book. You all ought to check it out. And another Burroughs author is Nikki Prince, who's working on her master's degree in creative writing. She also writes for Burroughs. And another romance novelist that we'd like to talk about is Eloisa James. She's a Shakespeare professor by day and a romance writer by night, a woman who, like many of us romance writers, she truly plays many parts. She defended romance in a really interesting New York Times op-ed. She said, "Intellectuals never seem to believe that a strong story and an interest in relationships could explain the popularity of romance."
She also said there's sex in most literary genres. Why disdain mine? So why write romance? I don't really feel like I need to justify it, but I do get asked that question over and over again because I'm a TV journalist. They're like, well, why don't you write something that is going to win a Pulitzer? Or why don't you write self-help books? You're a breast cancer survivor. Well, if I'm going to save the world, so to speak, I'm going to do that during my day job. At night, I need a break. This is a balance to my day job. You can see in this picture, I am an award-winning writer. I have 12 Emmys. I have an Edward R. Murrow Award. I won these awards for stories that I did that helped people. It helped a woman who was dying of cancer in hospice on, writing letters to her child because she didn't think she was going to live 2 more weeks. I helped her by writing and calling the FDA and going to a drug company to get compassionate use of a drug, and she lived for 4 years. So as far as I'm concerned, I helped this woman extend her life with her family. I followed a boy who was a great athlete here in Tampa Bay and got into a car accident and became paralyzed from the neck down, but he had this beautiful spirit that I wanted to share with everybody. He ended up going to Florida and graduating at the University of Florida. Wanted to go to law school in Miami, but he needed a modified van. Do you have any idea how expensive those modified vans are? Well, his family couldn't afford that. So for 2 years I worked to help this young man get the votes needed to get a modified van, and he's in law school down in Miami. So we writers do very powerful things, but at the end of the day, we need a break too. Journalists have a responsibility to the people that they write stories about. Whether we're writing a positive or a negative story, we have a responsibility because my words or Tamara's words could put someone in jail, possibly. So you feel that responsibility. There's also, you have to get it right as opposed to making it up. There's also the deadline pressure. I know you're aware of this. I'll just share a short story with you about that. Well, I don't know, 6 months ago when I was working for ABC, I'm driving to the station and all these fire trucks come whizzing by, and there's the ambulance and there's a fire truck, and I've been here 20 years, I know what a big deal is. So I call the assignment desk and I say, they're heading towards St. Joseph's Hospital. The hospital could be on fire. I'm pulling over, I'm gonna check it out. Pull over in the driveway, I take 1, 2, maybe 3 steps out of the car, and I get a phone call on my iPhone, and they said, you're live. I'm live? Like I'm in the parking lot. I don't even know I can't even see what's going on. No, you're live. This is Laura. She's throwing to you. And immediately, I'm walking through the parking lot with my iPhone. I walk up to the firefighter, interview him. I walk up to the lady at the hospital. My point in all this is that the deadline pressure for a journalist today is immediate. There is no gather the facts and get it together, right? You're tweeting, it's immediate. So the great thing about writing fiction is not only can we make it all up, but we can take our sweet time doing it. Unless your publisher or your agent or your editor puts a deadline on you. But it's usually not immediate. Because I am a journalist, there are some certain lines that I won't cross. My personal choice. I don't write erotica. I don't write about 2 men and a dragon. But I will write, my books are sexy. If you buy my books, they're rated R. If they were made into a movie, it'd be like a James Bond movie, right? There's lots of action adventure. There's a couple bad words. There's one sex scene, but it's not too graphic. That's about along the lines that I write. I won't write about my TV station. Why? Because smart women write romance, and that would not be smart. I will give a shout out to my friends though, usually with their permission. I say usually because sometimes a personality slips into my writing and it's not intentional, right? This is Eric Moore. He was a photographer friend of mine for 20 years at ABC Action News. He's funny. So I write thrillers and they're kind of serious. I'm a real type A adrenaline junkie, so I'm not really funny. You can ask my family, they're here. I'll tell you I'm not. So I needed to interject some humor into my book. So one day after work, I went into Eric's office, and I said, I'm going to read you every line of dialogue for Dallas Jones. And he changed every single line of dialogue. This is a review off Barnes & Noble. It's long, I won't read it all, for Cube Undercover. But at the end it says, Dallas was a freaking riot with his comedic timing. Right? So it worked. My husband, Jorge, who's in the audience here today, I got a rejection on Cube Undercover before it was published from an agent who said, your Latin man doesn't sound like a Latin man. I said, well, I'm not a Latin man, but I know one. So he was painting walls in our condo, and I followed him room from room and read the entire book to him. And he would stop and say, that's not how men think. That's not what men would say. That's certainly not what I would say. And so he helped me rewrite the dialogue, and it was shortly after that that Entangled bought the book. So maybe that's what was missing, just that sense of reality. Tamara's now going to jump up and tell you a little bit about why she writes romance.
Why do I write romance? Well, look at this picture. This is Haiti. This is where I was 2 days after the earthquake. I was there for 10 days, and then I went back for 3 weeks. And that was a really profound, I had been a journalist for, I don't know, probably I guess 20 years at that, well, no, maybe 18 years at that point. And that was a really profound experience for me, as you can imagine. The second day I was there, my editor got in touch with me and said, "You go find the mass graves." And I did. And so obviously it really made me sort of rethink life and death. And then after that, I continued to cover lots of breaking news. And in May of 2014, I covered, probably some of you locally will know, the Julie Schenecker trial, a woman who was convicted of shooting and killing her two teenagers. That was very difficult. Also in 2014, I covered this. This was right around the time I started writing romance. This was published September 18th. I had been writing for 2 months, writing romance. I just wanted to find a story that ended happily. I wanted to create a story that ended happily because I wrote so much that was so horrible, like this right here. This pushed me over the edge to really be serious about writing romance, because when you cover the story of a man who kills 6 grandchildren and his daughter and himself, he killed himself in front of the police. Where do you go from there? What do you think? How do you create something beautiful out of that? You don't, period, ever. So I wanted to write a story that ended really, really well. I wanted to write a story about 2 people who fell in love in a transcendent way and who had wonderful sex and a beautiful connection. And so that's what I did. And so there have been some roadblocks along the way, but I've been pretty fortunate overall. Like I said, I started writing in July of 2014. I had a finished book by December. I had my first offer in February of 2014. I know that that's probably not typical. I had 4 offers total on my book and 2 R&Rs, revise and resubmits. I obtained an agent who's sitting in the back row. Hi, Amanda. And I decided that Burroughs Publishing was the best publishing company to go with because the editor has an excellent reputation and their motto is where story matters. So that was really important to me because in my journalism career, I've done a lot of narrative nonfiction, both for the Tampa Bay Times, or what was then the St. Petersburg Times, for the Associated Press, and for Village Voice Media, and story is important to me. I'm not just slapping together sex scenes. Story is important to me. But I was rejected, though, many, many times by a dozen agents, 10 publishers, but that's pretty routine. I expect rejection. All writers do, all writers should, and I continue to expect rejection. I've also been fortunate in that my employer, the Associated Press, has been totally supportive of my fiction writing. I personally choose to write under my real name instead of a pen name, in part because I don't want to maintain different social media accounts. I don't have the time for that. I find that that's just so super daunting, and I already have a pretty wide social media network with Twitter and Facebook. I'm probably more comfortable with Twitter and Facebook than I am in front of you, so you can all hit me up and we'll chat very nicely after this. And so I also wanted to leverage that social media network in selling books, and that has worked pretty well, actually. Right now, the biggest roadblocks for me are coming now that the book is published. I have to juggle my day job for the AP. That previous slide was when I interviewed Mark Sanford when he went on his Appalachian Trail. I don't know if y'all remember that, but he confessed everything to me. That's a whole other love story that maybe I'll get to someday. But the roadblocks for me are juggling my day job and writing fiction, and also now that the book is published, I wouldn't call this a roadblock, but the realities of publishing and book writing, regardless of whether you're self-publishing with a small publisher or with a big publisher, it's up to me and it's up to Linda to market ourselves. I mean, Burroughs is giving me a lot of help in marketing in various ways, but I will tell you, a lot of my time now has been spent on trying to sell my book and trying to get people to read the book, because that's the most important thing. And there's so many challenges, and we're competing against so many different kinds of stories and media and everything. So that is really the reality of being a romance author, is to gain readers who enjoy your brand of catnip.
So my roadblocks were very similar. I got rejected a lot too. In fact, I joke around that I have a book of rejections that's thicker than the first book I ever got published. But the good news is the first book I wrote is the first book that got published. I just needed to work on my craft a little bit, and so I did. And I would take the advice of some editors who would write me back, and agents, and they would give me advice. And writing for TV is certainly a lot different, and newspaper is a lot different from writing for a fiction book. So we want you all to know, as romance authors, we take that seriously, and we have learned the craft of writing. I just got back from the Rockies, a 1-week immersion class with a woman named Margie Lawson, and all you do for a week is work on the craft of writing, on rhetorical devices, on backloading your sentences with power words, on how to become better. So it's a craft, and we do take it seriously. I had to use a pen name because I was working with ABC Action News in the beginning. The general manager said, I'm not so sure about this whole romance thing, so let's have you write under a pen name at first. And I was fine with that because, to be honest with you, I wanted to give it a test drive too. I didn't really know if I was a good writer in terms of fiction, and I wanted to see how people would react to it. So I chose to write under a pen name. And at the same time, I tried to keep my identity hidden. I tried to keep Linda Hurtado separate from Linda Bond, thus the first publicity photos when I'm the woman in shadow, you know. And it's very hard to do. So I don't have to do that anymore. I'm very glad. Why did I choose Bond, Linda Bond? And if anybody's a graphic artist and can put my picture right in the middle of there, I'd love that. That would be so cool. My mother's maiden name is Bond, and my uncle is James Bond, just not that James Bond. He is a law professor, retired, but from Winston-Salem. So it fit. I write thrillers, why not become Linda Bond? And now I'm kind of glad, because I tell people, I want you to know what you're getting from Linda. If you pick up something that Linda Hurtado wrote, it's going to be about health, it's going to be about education, it's going to be about how to better your family. That's what it's going to be, and you know that. If you write something written by Linda Bond, you're not going to give it to your 12-year-old. And I want you to know that. I want to be upfront, right? It's a sexy romance novel, so that's why I chose to write under Linda Bond. Now here's the difficult part of having all these personalities, right? I have to have social media for all of them, so you can follow me on social media as author Linda Bond. You can follow me as Linda Hurtado TV news anchor, or you can follow me as Linda Figueredo, soccer mom from Lutz. And you have to keep up with all of these social media accounts. But when you can do that and do it successfully, like most of us romance writers do, one of the skills that you have to have actually is to be a multitasker. I call us the multitasking mavens. This was me yesterday trying to finish this PowerPoint. The toilet overflowed, thus the towels all over the bathroom floor. That little dog right there, who I love, decided to dig a hole in the dirt, thus the dirty face and the dirty paws that were now going to be all over my wet white tile. Then the power went out, and then I heard something blaring in the driveway. I thought, great, someone's trying to steal my car. Someone's telling me something. I'm not going to finish this PowerPoint, but I did, right? So to be a romance writer and have a day job like we do takes a lot of multitasking. So we're wrapping things up. I wanted to end on this picture. Who out here can tell me what movie this represents? Gone with the Wind, right? This is one of my all-time favorite movies. But if you've seen the movie or you've read the book, you know it's not just about Rhett falling in love with Scarlett. It's not just about when they have sex, right? This is a historical epic novel. It's about the changing of the history in our country. It's about what war does to families. It's about culture changing. It's not just about the sex. And yet when you see Gone with the Wind anywhere, this is the image you see. Why? Why? Because this is ultimately what everybody wants. Everybody wants to love and be loved, right? And if you can be loved as passionately as Rhett loves Scarlett, then that's a beautiful thing. And if you can't, then you can read about it. We'll be selling our books right after this.
And that's where I'd like to make a couple of requests. One, if you buy any books today, ours, any of the authors here, I would like to request that you review them somewhere. Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble. Please, please, please. There's nothing more wonderful for an author to read a kind review, and it's so helpful for the authors, especially in these days of digital media. It's so helpful to review. So if that's my one request that sticks with you, please review us and everybody else here that you read at the festival. And thank you for coming. And I would like to leave you with another thing. Don't dismiss the romance genre. And sure, there are some badly written romances, and we can all think of them, but there are badly written thrillers and mysteries and westerns and narrative nonfiction books. But don't dismiss all of romance just because of 50 Shades of Grey. That's not representative of all romance. And good romance is really difficult to write. And if you don't believe me, then you should try it for yourself. There has to be tension on every page, and that's so difficult. The writer has to make the readers feel a range of emotions through the entire book, and there has to be a satisfactory end. Romance is not porn. Romance is not Fabio. Romance isn't a joke. Unless it's, comedic romance, then it is a joke. But don't discount romance. Give it a little respect and open yourself up to the possibility of a story that will make you forget, even for an hour or two, the realities of the world.
We'd like for you to keep in touch with us, and this is how you can do it. Tamara has her website up there, and you can also follow me at lindabond.com. Thank you. Good job.